Thank you for being here tonight. Again, my name is Kendall Flint. I'm managing the outreach portion of the program. And all of us are working together to basically help us create this your vision, not our vision, your vision. So Envision Yountville, as many of you know, this is basically looking forward to the future of how the plan is going to influence land use and the development of Yountville moving forward. This particular document is used to guide land use planning. That's where we put houses, businesses, how our roads connect, the amenities that we have, and the things that this town feels are important. Many of you may be aware of our workbook, which is available online at envisionyountville.com. And this is one of the things that our steering committee, the TAG, look at. Basically has a lot of background and information about Yountville historically. Because the deal is not to come in and start all over, but to take the community and look at where it's been, where it's going, and what things you want to preserve and what things you might want to tweak a little. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, is some of the things that might want to be tweaked and some things that might be wanting to be maintained. And for many of you are the people who are saying, we'd like to really see that change, and some of you are saying, don't change anything. Tonight, we're not making any decisions. We're simply looking at the community and saying, hey, what kind of things do you want to talk about? So where we are right now is actually still pretty early in the process. How many of you went to our speaker series? Any one of them? Okay, pretty cool. Then we had our last workshop, which is in August. There? Okay. So you know all about the clickers. Don't make fun of people that don't, right? We're going to help them along. We are still at community workshops. So right now, this is the second of our workshops. And actually, in January, we're going to be going out into the community, both to the Veterans Home, School District, and some local community groups, and taking this presentation to them as well. With all that input, then we have a draft general plan. That draft general plan is also influenced by the various boards and commissions. And then we go through, we're hoping in the spring, we're a little bit delayed because of our pushback on time, but to have an open house where we show you our impression of all the things you've asked for in terms of this general plan update. At that point, it'll also go back to the boards and commissions for review. We'll look at the environmental impact report, how it affects the environment, and then the council will give us direction till we get to a general plan that can be adopted. And we're still in the mindset that this will be completed in 2018. So tonight we have basically two steps. The first part of this is going to be a series of questions using the little clickers in front of you. So everybody grab a clicker. Only one clicker per person. We have staff around to make sure you don't cheat. TAG members, you are welcome to click. The only people who may not click have left the building, so it's all good. So every one of you is going to have an opportunity to share with us your ideas. So we're going to start with pretty much an easy question. I think it's easy for me. When it comes around to Thanksgiving, which is on Thursday, what will you be watching? The turkey, the backs of your eyelids, the Cowboys, the Macy's Day Parade. Who booed? I'm with you, whoever that was. The Macy's Day Parade or your waistline. So, or the dog show. There's a dog show? Oh my goodness. So these are A, B, C, D, or E, which on your keypad are listed there. So everyone pick which one. Everybody clicked? Survey says, okay, the turkey. How many of the guys said the turkey? Bless you all. Okay. Next question. This is now getting a little bit more interesting here. Now this one you have two choices. What is most important to you, based on being a resident, a business owner, wherever that might be, when considering potential development? One, sustaining tourism economy to pay for town services. As you know, through the speaker series and other things here, Yountville is driven, frankly, by the hotel revenue and by a lot of the sales tax revenue. Two, business diversity, the idea that it's not just wine tasting rooms, that it's got other things going on. Three, homes for families. 4, open space. 5, dog-friendly facilities. This may include a dog park for those of you that are tracking on that. And 6, other, something else that you'd like to see here that's most important for you. Everybody click your top 2. If you hit one number twice, it does not count twice. So hit one and hit the other. And if you only have one, just hit one. But everybody go ahead and lock that in. We are just a few votes away from a full house. Survey says, sustaining tourism, business diversity, homes for families, followed by open space, Dogs are loved. Other. Who said other, and what would your other be? Somebody did say other. Not trying to pick on you. Actually, I am. No, but what would be your other? What other things would you be interested in? Or was it an accidental push? I'm counting on you guys to be accurate. Okay? All right. Well, one of the things we want to make sure as we're going through this is to figure out why these things are important. So keep that in mind. Now, here's another one. Should be very interesting. If you could add more commercial space to the downtown area, the already developed downtown area, what kind of businesses would you like to see? Now, in this one, you can pick as many of these as you want. So you can pick up to 7 things. So you've got 1, non-wine retail. This means not a tasting room, obviously not selling wine. 2, personal services. That could be a hairdresser, it could be dry cleaner, it could be just anything that you would see as a visitor, or sorry, as a resident. Offices. This can be any type of office, CPA, whatever that might be, lawyers. 4, restaurants. 5, tasting rooms. 6, hotels. Or 7 others, something else you would like to see. You can pick as many of these as you like, 1 through 7. What would we like to see? Okay, so non-wine retail, personal services, offices, other. Now help me out on other. What are some other things we'd like to see? Yes, ma'am. Pharmacy. A pharmacy. Okay. Anyone else? Something. Yes, ma'am.
Economic diversity of
affordable restaurants. Okay, restaurants that have a lower price point that are more locals friendly. Overall, when you look at these things, it's really, when you see this particular diagram, we're talking about a lot of services that are really designed for the local resident as opposed to the folks that come to visit. That's kind of the theme that we're seeing on that. So that's pretty good. All right, now let's talk about this one in terms of policies. These are permits for new businesses. So someone comes into Yountville and says, I want to open up a business. So which of these policies for permits for a new business do you think you would support? 1, allow the market to decide, which is how it is right now. Someone comes in, if you've got an area that's zoned for a business, it just has to be a business. Could be any kind of business. 2, set a cap or other limits on things like tasting rooms or new tasting rooms. You may say we have X number, we can only have +2 or +3. And until, once that's done, no more tasting rooms coming to town. Set a cap or other limit on new sit-down restaurants. 4, set a cap or other limit on new hotels. And this is another one where you can pick all of these that you think are appropriate. Okay. All right, so I have a question here. For those of you that said allow the market to decide, what is the rationale on that? Do you think that's working for you? Is it just the way you think it should work? What is it you like about that particular answer? Anybody? Kind of things. Okay, so for those of you that would like caps on some of these things, and I see specifically the caps for new tasting rooms seem to be kind of top of mind for basically 2/3 of the people in this room. Do you have enough? Are you done with the wineries? Do you have enough of them right now, and you're just done? I'm seeing a lot of yes on that. Okay. All right, what about when you talk about the caps on restaurants, sit-down restaurants, those tend to be a little bit more formal. Is it the price point that you're concerned about? The fact of affordability, the sit-down restaurant might be more costly than an alternative? Anybody? Yep, okay, nods on that one. And then finally on hotels, are there any types of hotels that you would consider? Because about half of you are for that, about half of you are not. Are there hotels that you would welcome here? Or are you done with the hotels in terms of the number of rooms that we have in here right now? So let's talk about tasting rooms. Tasting rooms, of course, very popular here. We see quite a few of them. And one of the things we may be looking at are differences to the policies regarding them. So here's one right now we want to ask you about. Do you think the town's current approach when approving tasting rooms, which means you're limited to a 2-ounce pour, you cannot have service outdoors, and you have to require retail diversity, which means they've got to sell other things than just wine, whether that's glasses or shirts or whatever that might be. This is the policy that's in place right now. For you tonight, is it 1, too restrictive, 2, just right, or 3, too lenient? The existing policy as it applies to tasting rooms in Yountville. Too restrictive, just right, too lenient. Let's see what survey says. Okay. Just about right, too lenient, too restrictive. Do I have any wine owners here tonight? Okay, too restrictive? Too lenient? Just right. Just right, okay. Yes? Too restrictive. And what to you is too restrictive about that?
On the basis that not everybody is playing the same game.
As in, you might have 3 tastes at one tasting room and 5 at another, or?
Different, depends on what you've got on the train.
When you,
Yeah, the first guys here are under different policies.
oh, I see. So you feel there's a lack of consistency across the different tasting rooms that exist here in Yountville? Okay, so policies that might even that playing field for tasting rooms would be better. Okay. For those that they think that they are too lenient, what is too lenient about those? Yes?
My consideration with it, it's very difficult. I mean, are they really going to really follow through on it?
So finding ways to actually monitor that either through code enforcement or some sort of enforcement policy to make sure it's working.
Enforce it or don't have it.
Okay.
It's like, if you're going to have it, then fine, enforce it. If you're not going to have it, if you're not going to enforce it, then don't have it.
Okay, good point. Okay, let's take a look at this next one. This has to do with sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. Some places have them, some places do not. So one of the questions here is, when we're looking at the old historic district, would you support any of the following improvements? This is, again, you can pick as many of these, or in this case, you can only, if you say no, then it's just one. But would you like to see sidewalk, curb, and gutter there? That's number 1. Would you like to see underground utilities? 3, street lights? Or 4, no, keep it exactly as it is, change nothing. So you can have 1, 2, 3, all 3 of them, or 1 of them, or 4. What's your opinion about this as it pertains to the historic district? All right, so underground utilities, sidewalk, curb, and gutter, not so much. Street lights, maybe okay for a little less than half. And no, keep as that as it is. That's pretty much about 1 out of 6 of you for all of these different things. So for those of you that talk about undergrounding utilities, just out of curiosity, that can be kind of expensive. How would you pay for that, just out of curiosity? Anybody? Yeah, she's like, no. Yeah, any ideas on that one? I know. Yeah, it'd be great if you could get it. Okay, for the folks that would like to see sidewalk, curb, and gutter, what is it you would like about that? Because in some neighborhoods, they don't want to see it at all. If you don't want to see sidewalk, curb, and gutter, why not? And if you do, why do you want to see that? Yes?
Inconsistency.
Within other neighborhoods within the town?
Everything that it looks like, Scotch.
Okay, a little hodgepodge, so we want to see consistency in the curbs and gutters. It can also be challenges for folks that have ADA issues or whatever getting around town. Okay. And just out of curiosity, who are the keep it as it is? Yeah, okay, all right, there you go. All right, let's take a look at this. Now, this is 6 residences that are on Washington Street on the north end of town. How many of you have been to like San Luis Obispo or Santa Barbara, and you've seen some of the areas where they've taken residential homes and they've basically rezoned them to allow for small businesses, a beauty shop, a lawyer's office, things like that, right? Keeping the character of the house, but allowing for different kind of things. These are the 6 parcels that we're talking about right now. And the question tonight is really, when you look at these, under what circumstances, if any, would you support rezoning those parcels to allow something else to happen from a commercial standpoint? And in this one, we want you to select all of them that you would be comfortable with. So the first one is basically, number 1, small office service use in existing structure. So you take the footprint of the home exactly as it is. It doesn't change anything. It just means instead of someone living there, you might find a real estate agent or a CPA or something else there. 2, boutique retail, not food or wine, so not a tasting room. 3, small office service retail where the homeowner resides. And we see this again in some of the other communities. Perhaps upstairs bedrooms are continue to be used as a living space. With the back kitchen, you have something in the front or other rooms that might serve a retail purpose. 4, boutique or small lodging, bed and breakfast, again, using the existing footprint of the home. 5, complete redevelopment, which means you'd be comfortable with leveling it and building something else entirely in that space. Or 6, nope, keep those 6 houses as housing exactly as they are. So select all that apply on these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. small office, boutique retail, small office with homeowner in the building, small lodging, complete redevelopment, or nope, keep it as housing. Wow. Okay, so about a third of you are no, keep it as it is. Half of you, actually more than half of you, are okay with other types of uses. In this case, we're looking at the most popular three being small office, boutique retail, or small office. A little less love for small lodging, very little love for the completely redevelopment, and then small amount for retained as housing. For those of you that like the small office things, what kind of things would you like to see there? If there was an office or a retail thing, what would you like to see in that area? What type of business? Anybody? Yes? Insurance or notary or, again, something that's more serving on the town. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this is when we look at the different options going forward, we're going to open this up again online for some other input, but you can see that people visualize this differently. But I do see from looking at that most everybody, almost all of you, want to keep the physical structure, the physical structure, the aesthetic of it. Would that be accurate to say? Okay. So the physical aesthetic stays the same, but you might be comfortable with some different uses depending on how that fleshed out. Okay. Who's been to the concession stand? Oh, yes? Huh? Mm-hmm. We're going to get there in a minute with some places where you can do housing and other things. So these are the easy questions, theoretically speaking. Yeah. Oh, she was saying that she'd like to talk, it's not so much about housing for those particular 6 properties, but she has an interest in additional housing here in the area. And whether it's those 6 that are lost for business, it's like, okay, but we'd like to see other types of housing.
I mean, they don't care if they're redeveloped to something else.
Yep.
They're not losing housing stock, so it's like a caveat.
So a caveat that if we're going to change it to something else like retail or office or whatever it might be, that there's a replacement someplace in the mix that's going to bring back those number of housing units in some way, shape, or form. And I tell you, the WRT team is going to be talking about that very thing in just a minute. Who's been to the concession stand before? Okay, so it doesn't look like that now, right? But one of the questions is that we're asking tonight, you can see this is kind of populated, where what would happen if that became something that the town utilized as a year-round business? So to better utilize that space, would you be interested at all in looking at a full-time vendor of some part that operated out of there? And this could be, food, it could be, hot dogs, I don't know, it could be some other thing, but we're talking about that space being used on a year-round basis. So absolutely, also with no parking requirement, it would use the parking spaces that already exist in the downtown area. So to better utilize that, are you for it? Absolutely, number 1. 2, sure, I guess. That was Nathan's, by the way, I just have to say that. I think that was so awesome. 3, no, I'm hesitant, I don't know. Or 4, no, absolutely not going to happen. So 1, 2, 3, or 4, using the concession stand on a year-round basis. And this is why I have a job. No, you can see it's kind of like, well, I think what I get out of this and from the comment is basically it's going to depend on the concession, right? What the business is in there. You put a wine tasting room in there, not so much. Yes, sir.
Who owns it?
I think the town owns that. Steve, no, who owns it? School district owns it. No alcohol, okay. So, and as long as Little League gets to keep going with it, okay. And get profit year round, okay. All right, the next thing we're going to go into, there have been a few emails going about. I want to just set this next couple of questions up with a very specific direction. Again, we're talking about a very general idea right now. There is not a specific plan in place. We are not talking about anything more than just a concept at this point, and that is right, we're talking about dogs. How many of you have dogs? Okay, so the big question of the day, this is one of a couple, how important is locating a dog park within one of our existing parks to you? And just for clarification, this is a fenced, for argument's sake tonight, this is a fenced, contained dog park. It is not an off-leash park. It is not dog races. It is simply an enclosed park where your dog can play with other dogs. Okay? Dog park. Are we thinking that is very important, somewhat important, or not important? Dog park. Oh, okay. So some of you just don't like dogs, right? Yes, sorry.
Is there a legal requirement that
There isn't a legal requirement, but in most communities that start with a dog park, they will figure out a way to make that a contained space from a security standpoint and from insurance. And it could very much be that something comes up later and you can decide at a later date whether it's off leash or on leash or if it's fenced or whatever. But it's just in general, we're talking about the concept of a dog park, you know, conceptually. So what she's saying is basically
There we go.
whatever your particular thing, and that's true. I mean, there are some people who play pickleball. I cannot play pickleball. There's some people who play bocce here in town. There are others that walk or ride and use the bike trails. The question is just in general, and again, we're not making any decisions tonight. This is way up here. We're just trying to get a pulse of what those things are that people care about. And it may very well be that there's options for both. That there could be a dog park, and there can also be bocce ball, and there can be something else.
I think the
Yeah.
question is flawed because we're not voting on how many people think. I think the question puts a recreation interest up to a popular vote, and we don't do that with our other recreation interests. If we were to say how many people is it important to use the volleyball court in Veterans Park, I'm not sure that how many people would say that's important. So, or how important is that we have the squares for chess or checkers on
Sure.
some of those tables. So I think that the question is a faulty design in my opinion.
Appreciate that. I think the reason, just to share, the reason that this question and all the questions are being asked, and these specific questions, is this is what came out of the outreach for the first phase. So these were the specific things that people asked us to come back and talk to the community about. So we didn't get anybody asking about pickleball because there's already pickleball there, there's already bocce ball there, but this is one of the things they asked. And the Parks and Recreation Department, as you may know, either has just finished or is in the process of doing a strategic plan where they really do look at all the different things that people want to do. So it's all, I don't want you to get too caught up in, there's a whole lot of other stuff that's going to be much more fun to play with in a little bit. And again, based on that, there are 6 parks in town right now that may be considered for a dog park or a location that dogs could play. And the question is, and if you don't care about any of these, you don't have to vote for any of these, but the idea here is, if you were going to put a dog park in which of these parks would you locate it? That's Yountville Community Park, Forester Park, Vineyard Park, the Toy and Terrace Tot Lot, Veterans Park. 6, wait, if we're going to do ag property on the north end of town and that develops, maybe we can park there. Or I just don't want a dog park. All right. If there was something on the north end of town, which we're going to be talking about in the next phase, and let's say there's space that develops up there, it might be possible that something could be located in there. There's more open space. All right, I'm going to close that one out. I don't want a dog park. Wait. I'm going to blow past this one. Just going to blow past it at the moment. Kind of know where this is going, but I do want to ask it. This is the Toy and Tot Lot. Would you support, because this is one of the locations that people have discussed, would you support removing the play equipment and converting it to a dog park? Absolutely sure, I guess. I'm hesitant, no. Let's make this one go fast, people. This is the Tot Lot. That's that way. That way, sorry. I'm turned. Okay. Here we go. All right, and I'm gonna, yep. Okay, so let's get to something more fun. Vacation rentals. All right, the town currently does not permit vacation rentals. This is VRBO, Airbnb, the type of things that people do like that. You can't have permit a rental of 30 days or less. Would you maintain this policy? 2, change it to allow unlimited vacation rentals. Or 3, change it to allow a limited number of vacation rentals. This is very specific to that phenomenon of home away, Airbnb, VRBO. The idea that people come in and will rent a place for a week or 10 days or a weekend. Okay. Maintain, big love for maintain. Change to allow unlimited, change to allow a limited number of vacation rentals. And just reason being for the folks that want to see more vacation rentals, what is it that you find attractive about those for the local economy? Why would you like to see that policy changed? Even though you're outnumbered quite a bit. Yes.
This is typically happening anyway, so charge TOT. I mean, the people
Okay.
are coming, those people will be spending money in the local businesses, and in the meantime, charge TOT that goes back towards the programs. Otherwise, the houses are sitting vacant for these
Right.
homes anyway.
And that is something we've heard in other communities. It's basically that they feel like people are doing it anyway. They're not necessarily being enforced. So if we're going to do it anyway, at least get the revenue for it or find a way to enforce. So that's a really good point there. Let's talk about size of buildings. Okay, these are Vista condos, where Vista condos is. And the question here is when you look at this drawing, this is a schematic saying, okay, these are currently single story. And one of the challenges we have in Yountville is the ability for families to expand, to have more rooms to house their family. So the question is here, would you support allowing Vista condos to become 2 stories, to put in additional bedrooms upstairs? Now that would be, of course, they'd still have to maintain the setbacks that are required, you know, from the street and the sidewalk and all that. But would you let them go to 2 stories? 1, yes, 2, no, or 3, I just don't know, I'm unsure. I'm sorry?
Maintaining the 50% rule?
This would actually increase the floor area ratio for this project. Sandra, does that increase the,
This is a condo property,
Yeah.
Vista condos, so the 50% rule doesn't apply.
okay, so this is a condo complex that could have a 2nd floor on their condo. Vista condos, what street is that on? Vista Drive. It's near, that's right, it's near the Adventist church. Okay. Increasing height. Okay. Yes. No. Unsure. But most of you are comfortable with that. Okay. Now this is the same thing, a little different. Would you support permitting a higher floor area ratio for Toyon Terrace, similar to Heritage Estates or Washington Park, if it would allow families to grow their homes? Now, floor area ratio is the amount of space you can have in a home relative to the size of the lot that it's on. And it's currently 25 to 35%. So you can only take, I'm looking back in the back there at my planner, Sandra.
Correct.
Yeah. Floor area ratio, it's the difference between the livable space that you have and the size of the lot that you're on. And it's
Right.
basically saying, would you allow a higher percentage? You can build more space, provided, again, it's setbacks. You might be going
Yes.
higher, you might be doing backyard.
And that ratio is not just a footprint, that's floor area, so it includes both stories.
Right. So this is just allowing for more space, more floor area.
Let me share some additional information on other neighborhoods too. Old Town Historic, they're at a lower percentage of 25%, but they can have their garage excluded from FAR if on the rear half of the parcel. Then when you look at the properties we've noted, like Heritage Estates or Washington Park, since those were master development projects, they're often permitted as high as 40%. So there's a wide range in town depending on neighborhood.
So it's basically loosening up the regulations to allow for the expansion on existing homes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the Toyon Terrace neighborhood, there's another characteristic I
Yeah.
just want to note. They have more of the one-story homes and very, very few two-stories. So it has a different streetscape and a different massing, which is what FAR is really intended to get at.
Okay.
So there may be room for expansion there.
It's also an arbitrary standard, like the gentleman said about some wine places.
Arbitrary standards that change for different different
So
areas.
Toyon Terrace is an older development. It's not as old as Old Town, but it's in the 70s. And so subsequent developments, the rules changed and they were given more room.
Right.
So it's sort of like, you would say it maintains that neighborhood's character to be what it is, but I would really argue that living there. I think it's just discrimination based on when your neighborhood was developed.
Okay. Well, and that's why we're asking.
It's not discrimination, but it's just your luck of the draw based on whether the developer got a sweeter deal
at the time
than
that,
someone else or not.
and these things change over time, as you all know. If you've lived here for a number of years, the size of the building, the mass of the building, it's not stagnant. It does change. So that's absolutely right. So in this one, would you support it? Yes, no, or unsure. Permitting a higher ratio. Let's see what we got here. Yeah. So most folks would. There's a few that are no's, and we've got a few that are unsure on that one. But I think, again, that would probably also apply to the design guidelines, what it was going to look like, all those other kind of things that fit into it. Okay, we've got a few more of these before we go to the next exercise. This is the senior overlay, which is in the mobile home parks. And one of the questions we have tonight is, with this senior overlay, that means that the homes that are in that area are designated for senior citizens 55 and older. So the question is, would you be willing to remove the overlay in order to provide more housing for families and other people that want to come to Yountville? So that would mean that some of these areas that are predominantly senior citizens might start seeing people with kids or small kids or people that are in town working for other things. So again, this is a yes, no, or unsure. Removing the senior overlay. Opening it up for other people other than 55 and older to be able to live there. Removing the senior overlay, we're almost there. No. Okay, so this is one of those tricky things too, because we do hear a lot in the speaker series and in general. For those that said yes, just out of curiosity, because you want to see more housing for families, not enough affordable out there, just out of curiosity, anybody want to weigh in on that one? For anybody who said yes?
I didn't want to talk this much. I'm sorry. I was trying to have someone else talk on this one. But if you look at our town, it's like, I think I was looking, it's like 60% older adults. Is that right? And so I would think that we're going to trend more in that direction, and very soon I will be an older adult. I probably already am. But it's kind of a sad thing that we lose our families and that young people can't afford to live here. So those are our most affordable properties.
Yes, in the back? Yeah.
So I actually think that people can self-select, and if older people are willing to live in certain areas, I think that that's totally fine, and I think that's a good thing, and families can live in other areas.
Okay. So these were actually, even with some of the exciting discussion, these were actually kind of the simple things. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. So basically what we're going to do now is, you see these maps in front of you, and there are little envelopes, which most of you have been good enough not to open at this point. What we're going to do right now is Peter's going to walk you through, the WRT guys are going to walk you through some concepts about land use. So at this point, we're going to be talking about 3 specific areas, and we're going to be asking you to weigh in within your tables. And I'm very pleased that you've all migrated to tables, so you'll be together. There's 2 things you're going to need to do for us. They're going to take this exercise and last about a half hour, 45 minutes. You're going to have to appoint among your group someone to write down notes based on these questions we're going to be asking you. And you're going to have to appoint somebody that's going to be willing to report back to the rest of us about what your group came up with. I want to point out that, again, you're going to hate some of these ideas and you're going to love some of these ideas, and that's okay. Everybody's opinion is valid. We'll be wandering around, so if there's anybody, beating on anybody else, we'll take care of that. We want you to talk to each other and really make sure that you are listening to what other people have to say. Are you looking for the microphone?
So right now, it's probably, I can tell you're already doing it. Take 1 minute right now to appoint someone to be the scribe, the note taker, and someone to be the voice who's going to present for you. Take care of that now, so then we'll be able to focus on a little presentation.
I would say,
1 minute.
I also say, if you only want to get the note taker who has the best handwriting first, that's great. And then after you discuss, you can appoint your speaker to see how it goes.
Okay. Because we get to give you guys a little bit more information before you guys are able to do these exercises. Peter and I are designers and planners from WRT. We've been part of the team and part of this process, and have met many of you before, as well as your tag. We've had, I think, one of the fun parts of this is taking some of the feedback that you guys have already given in speaker series, first workshop, etc., and testing some of those ideas just a little bit more within your town. And I think, as Kendall said, these are ideas in order for you guys to have a better conversation. These are not proposals, but these are us testing some of the themes related to How do we diversify our economy? How do we provide wider ranging opportunities for existing residents? How do we strengthen local businesses? And there are a couple places, both in the downtown as well as some undeveloped properties, where we can test some of these ideas. And you guys can look at that and you can say, okay, these are some of the things there that I like, and these are some of the things that I really don't like. And that's a really helpful thing to the planning team, to your TAG members, to city leadership, because together then we can craft a plan that either gets to some of those things or steers away from some of those things. So that's a little bit of preamble for some of these explorations. I'm going to talk about some downtown opportunities, and Peter is going to talk a little bit about some edge of town parcels and opportunities there. So first off, and jumping right into the downtown core, and historically the downtown of Yountville and really the areas right here just across the street, that the areas to the west of Washington, so between the freeway and Washington, those were always tourist, visitor serving kinds of uses. Were generally focused in those areas. And so what this is saying is that, okay, there's actually some undeveloped areas within that, within those lands, within those parcels, and are there opportunities to explore some additional uses within those lands, some which may continue to be visitor serving, or are there also opportunities for more local serving uses in the kinds of salons, dentist offices, notaries, other kinds of things that were discussed and that some of you brought up just a little while ago. So are there things that could be developed there that work within Yountville's character, developing its economy and matching residents' interests, and also to look at some of the massing and the sizes of some of those, of some building potential within those properties as well. So just to zoom in just a little bit, we're here in the community center, and we're just across the street at the intersection of Yount and Washington. So we're really looking at the land, the parking lot areas between the Railway Hotel, Villaggio Inn, the V Marketplace, up to the Grosinger Estates, and kind of the areas along Washington Street. And when we've done just a little bit of analysis, we've looked at what makes it a really engaging place to be, a really engaging place to walk. What is that public realm is what we often call that. That feeling of when you go out for an evening stroll and you're walking down the sidewalk, you have Bouchon and you have Hurley's and you have these sort of places of life, and then there's other areas where you don't have as much going on. So we marked in red lines those kinds of buildings that have kind of a nice feeling on the street. So here's Bouchon, here's the area, the building just to the north, I think it's a gallery or a tasting room. We have the community center here. We have some other areas where you don't have as much going on along the street edge. You have parking lots, and that's this picture here in the lower right. Still, it's a nice walk, but you're walking along the fronts of cars. So we've looked at where some of those gathering areas are and some of that character. Thank you. It's a little tricky. We've also then looked at some of the pedestrian connections. And there's a great path that goes up here just next to the community center on the other side of the street. There's a really important north-south connection from the Villaggio Inn connecting up to the V Marketplace. We also have the wine trail and the pathways that run parallel to the freeway. The V Marketplace itself is a really important anchor right in the middle of this, as the photo suggests. And interestingly, that building's over 40 feet tall. It makes a beautiful landmark as seen from the freeway. We've looked at then some of the views in and out of this area. So I think one of the things that's so important and special when you're in downtown Yountville is not only the great places where you are and that you're looking at immediately, but what you can see from around you. Can you see out? Can you see to the hills to the west? Can you see to the vineyards? Do you have that feeling of open space that everybody holds so dear in this town? You actually do have that feeling here in Yountville. And there's a legal deed for a view shed here at the end of Mulberry Street. So there's a requirement that that remains open. Similarly, we think there's an important view shed here next to the V Marketplace that this photo suggests. That's another really important place where you can see out of town. We think that's important. It's also not legally restricted or necessarily preserved. We wanted to note that. And similarly, views from the freeway. As you're driving along town, you really get to about this point, and that's when you're able to see into the downtown. You're really able to see Yountville. And what is it that you see? You see the V Marketplace, you see some of the parking lots, but what you see, I think, is also pretty important and something that you guys would want to be considering as part of thinking about this area. So what we have put together are some ideas of creating new social spaces, view corridors, that sense of place of where you are and what you see, and thinking about built form, thinking about buildings that can support a resilient economy, whatever those uses are that we all think are going to be important, but also the character of those buildings that really reinforces town identity. So this is a concept plan that then suggests in magenta color a few places where we could remove a parking lot, and that's a place where a building and a new use could go, where it creates a little bit more of a walking edge along Washington Street. It infills some of those vacant areas. And we've redistributed some of the parking, and that's going to be an important context here. It could also preserve and reinforce views both out of town as well as into the town, what would complement views to the V Marketplace that you would see as you're passing by Yountville, and then realizing, hey, I still want to stop there. I'm going to go turn around at that next exit. So to look at this in just a little bit more detail and looking at those areas to the north. So what if you infilled that parking lot bay with a couple of buildings? Maybe it had a similar theme and a style to the Stewart Cellars. Not necessarily use, but just in terms of some buildings, some pedestrian spaces, outdoor spaces, something that's kind of nice, reinforces the sense of the street. The existing lawn that's next to it, well, you know, over in Sebastopol, has anybody been over into that sort of new area in Sebastopol? There's kind of a lot of shed buildings and stuff. There's some outdoor lawns that are actually quite active, and the buildings open up and reinforce some of those activities. So people come out, they hang out on the lawn, and that's what this image starts to describe here. So there's an idea that you could create a new building in that location, and that's opposite Bouchon, the bakery there, and it's really of a similar size. It's a one-story building like Bouchon. You could also look at another opportunity that says, well, what if we wanted to put a second story? Because ground floors typically are more focused on retail and serving people off of the sidewalk. But if there was an upstairs space, that could be an office space or some other kind of ancillary use, right? Retail spaces upstairs don't work as well, so that starts to become more of an opportunity for some other kind of a use. And the height of the building would be then taller than a one-story building, still within the height limits of downtown, which is 30 feet. And remember, V Marketplace is 42? Something like that. There's examples of other two-story buildings, whether it's Larkspur or Glen Allen. So then we're going to look here just to the building opposite the community center, an opportunity to infill at this site, both for existing parking. This is also where the railway hotel is. So this could be a shed building that could then go over the top of the railway hotel, or the railway hotel cars could be relocated. We're not saying really one way or the other. I think that's all very flexible. And this shows then a retail space in the front. It could shows more of an office space in the back. So this is Washington Street out here. This is the community center across the street. Community center, two-story building. So you could start to have this kind of a size of a building, and it would have a complementary feel to this building there across the street as an opportunity. And outdoor spaces that could be similar to that. Now, when we look at this the parcel then in the rear, if you remember, there's two important things that we've done. One, we've added some new uses and some new buildings. The other thing that we've done is we've located some of those buildings where existing parking is, right? So we've got to put parking back. So the two things I want to talk about here in these slides have to do with those buildings and the parking. So let's start with the buildings. These are two kind of anchor buildings on either end of a parking structure in the center. So here's V Marketplace on the left-hand side or on the north side here. And this might be then more of a retail building facing out onto a plaza. And then on the other side, facing onto the Villaggio, perhaps it's more of an office type of a use. This shows a two-story building, and this is well within the current height limits. Some examples of what those look like. This is in Bend, Oregon, and some really great, cool architecture. They're doing a lot of cool stuff within their downtown that could be kind of interesting and applicable here. Some great indoor and outdoor spaces, or more office, and this is a photo from Sonoma. We've also looked at it to say, well, what if you went to 3 stories within those two anchor buildings? And perhaps in the upstairs, maybe it's a granny flat, or maybe it's a small live workspace, or kind of an artist studio, but just to stack those uses up, again, lining and fronting the parking garage. And you can see the scale difference between V Marketplace and what could be, this shows a 2-story, this shows a 3-story building over here. So just kind of testing those things out. It's interesting to note here, Lafayette, this is a pretty beautiful 3-story building. There are some nice ways to do that. And this is just across the street here, Maison Fleur. This is a 3-story building. And there's some good things that folks have noted about it. One is that 3rd floor is actually part of an attic space. So you don't have that kind of mass of a building. It's also stepped down. It's not just one big building, but in fact, there's an outdoor terrace here on a 1-story piece. So how you design a 3-story building becomes pretty important. The second thing we wanted to talk about in this is the parking garage itself. And you know, in today's age, we hear a lot of folks saying, well, yeah, we need parking today, right? It's important. We've got a lot of people coming to town. We've got hotel users. We've got restaurants. People need a place to park. But we also hear people saying, you know, why are we still talking about places to park and building parking garages when in 20 years we're all going to have self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles. We're not going to need a place to park. And we don't exactly know. As planners, we know things are going to change. We don't know exactly how. We do know that right now we are going to need some parking. So this demonstrates that there is a way to design a parking structure that could be used for other purposes in the future. If you design a building with a higher floor plate, not just for parking garages and minimum clearance for vans, but actually something that could be converted over to other kinds of uses, residential, office, or some warehousing or industrial kinds of things, there's some creative things you can do with parking garages, and that's probably about as much of a point as it's realistic to make tonight. But there are some interesting things you can do. Also interesting things you can do on the roof. So this shows both green walls and exterior treatments on garages. Maybe there's the idea of using more stacked parking within that bottom floor, rooftop functions, dining terraces, things that you can do associated with garages. But with a garage, you would need to both replace the parking that you've lost as well as provide some additional parking for some of those new uses. So it's kind of a big concept here and an interesting opportunity and one to explore, and one that obviously we're not going to resolve everything tonight, but your input and feedback here is going to be pretty important. So that is the downtown piece, and I'm going to pass this along to my colleague Peter, who's going to talk about the edges of town. I think so. Yes. So it's a great question, in that all of these properties and things that we're talking about tonight, right, throughout the city is all private, most is privately owned, right? And the city, as it goes through a general plan process, has to make some of those decisions.
Right,
and so I think Steve's going to weigh in.
Yeah, to clarify, none of these are projects. These are all ideas, and we have zoning. And we have rules and guidelines. So the real question for you is, what's out there? Anything that becomes project specific, and to your answer, the property owners, just like you, for example, property owners have sold property so that it can be developed. So the concept here is the property owner that on that particular parcel would have a right to continue doing what they're doing now, which is called a grandfathered use, or if their zoning changes and they want to develop and do something with the new zoning, then they would apply to do so at that. And in fact, that's not atypical. In 1992, the town developed a lot of new zoning and policies, and that led to many of the development and guidelines. But when we talk in a conceptual, and even if you rezone something, it does not necessarily mean that something is going to come in there unless the property owner wants to do something. The same way we can zone something to say we want these type of businesses, but ultimately a business operator has to say, yes, I want to rent the space, operate that, and I can make a living doing that. So again, think these are big conceptual. A challenge in a small town like Yountville is we have a tendency to drill down to the, ooh, well, I know so-and-so. How would that look? What we're really looking at is what framework and what concepts and what pictures, because if there's some interest in some of these ideas, then the community will have a refined dialogue about what that might look like.
Yeah, it's a great point, and we didn't clarify that well enough earlier, so thanks. I do want to keep moving for sake of time because we're going to have more opportunities for questions. Great.
So I actually really love this downtown conversation, and I'm glad that everyone gets a chance to have it at the tables. And I sort of hesitate to move on because I think this is really rich, but I'm going to move on to talk about two agricultural parcels that are within town limits. They're similar in some ways and they're very different in other ways, but I think that both of them belong in the conversation when we're thinking about a 20-year, pretty long-range general plan. And I want to sort of remember for everyone that I think part of what, I think most people here might agree that part of what makes Yountville really special is that it is very compact. It has maintained this very small town, walkable scale, small town character. But also it's grown very incrementally and very little bit by little bit by little bit over time. So over a 20-year period, it could be that there may be some expansion that is appropriate. So I think it's useful to look at these properties and understand what the community's vision is at this point in time, because the last time this happened was some time ago, 1992. So our question tonight is, if and when these parcels were to develop, what would the community members want to see happen on those parcels now? I'm going to start with the parcel on the south. Interestingly, in Yountville, there really are only two undeveloped agricultural parcels, and so it's sort of a knowable thing. It's not like there's hundreds and hundreds of parcels. So this one in the south, it's been actually zoned for residential development for quite a long time, interestingly. It just hasn't happened. It's owned by a church. There's a church fronting on Washington Street, but the rest of the property is a vineyard. It's very beautiful. Hopper Creek runs through the property. I'm not going to try to manipulate the pointer, but I think this picture on the left, Hopper Creek, there's a trail in parts of the town. That creek goes through this property. The property in the north, somewhat larger, also is a vineyard. This one is different, though, in the sense that it's actually zoned for agriculture. So right now, it's only agriculture that can happen there. And as far as we understand, the owner isn't interested in changing that use. It's a going concern. It's a vineyard, but it's still worth exploring because it's within town limits. And so it is something that the general plan can address. Again, this property, very scenic edges. It sort of is that property between the edge of town on the north and the hill, Yountville Hill. It's right next to the cemetery, directly to the west, and has beautiful scenic views across the valley. Actually, one more thing that I'd like to point out about both of these properties, in the case of the one on the south end of town, it's almost entirely all within the 1% annual flood hazard zone, which means there are certain additional requirements for development to be elevated, certain types of development to be elevated above that base flood elevation. The property in the north, you can see that blue line, maybe you can see it, I'm not sure, that covers just a portion of the property, a small portion. A small portion of that property is also within that 1% flood zone. So we looked at some of the opportunities. We wanted to think about if the land use were to change on either of these parcels, what might the town get out of that? What are some of the things that we've heard from the community as desirable potential changes could be facilitated by some change of use on that property? That property in the south, because it's right next to the Gateway mobile homes, we saw that as an opportunity maybe to have an intergenerational community, where if some new development were to happen, it would bring families in, and it could be done in a way that kind of knit together with the existing mobile home park and create an intergenerational atmosphere. We thought there's probably an opportunity for long-term agricultural conservation as part of any development. And there was an opportunity for the Hopper Creek Trail to be extended and for everyone in town to have access to a portion of that creek and riparian corridor that right now is not publicly accessible. So we explored a few sort of development concepts for this property, and I want to sort of say once again, these are really just, these are done in order to show what development could look like on this property. There's no project proposed, but it's in order to help everyone sort of visualize what different formats of development could look like. The first one we looked at was sort of like the Washington Square neighborhood, I would say. It's a mixed residential environment with a mix of single-family homes, townhomes, and some multifamily housing. We're showing a park next to the creek, and we're showing a little bit of conserved agricultural land as well. Then there's sort of another similar but slightly different option where it's alternative housing types, starting to get into some of the housing types that I think people are beginning to look at now because of their lower construction costs in a context of affordability, which I think everyone is concerned about. So this is showing what if we had a mix of single-family houses, tiny houses, fabricated prefab houses that maybe can be done with very nice materials and lower the costs and sort of reduce that barrier of entry for a lot of families to Yountville. And then we looked at what could it be like if you had a higher density, just a multifamily development. Same overall density, so same number of units, but all multifamily, in this case kind of clustered near Washington Street, and this would allow a far larger portion of the property to remain undeveloped and, let's say, conserved in the long term. Now, there are reasons, now, in other words, this property has been zoned for residential development for some time, so the capacity is there now, theoretically, but it hasn't happened, and Yountville will continue to need to grow over the next 20 years, whether it's because this property owner has just not been interested in developing, or because maybe the flood zone causes construction costs to be more complicated and higher. It seems worth looking at this north parcel as well to understand what could happen on that property were it to develop. Again, the scenic environment, I just wanted to sort of point that out. Here, a little bit different mix of opportunities. It's a larger parcel. There's more opportunities for housing. Less of the property is in the floodplain, or flood zone. So that seems to be a little bit potentially less complicated to develop there. Something more visitor-oriented could be thought of, might be appropriate there. Another inn, perhaps. And then there's more flexible, larger spaces that could be available for a new park, trails, and so on. We did sort of, in this case, we did sort of an interesting little test to test the scale of developments that you might know from other towns nearby and how those would fit onto this property, just to get a sense of how big this property is and what things might look like. So the first test we did is what would it look like to have sort of a inn, hotel, resort, spa, sort of like Solage. So we actually cut and pasted the Solage Hotel, which is up in Calistoga, onto the property. And you can see that Solage Resort and Hotel fits very comfortably. It's a rather large resort. Fits comfortably on this property, and there's also room down at the southern end. And thank you, that's very helpful. there still would be room along the southern end to have a small housing component. Actually, Solage, interestingly, does have some affordable housing that was developed in tandem with that resort. And you also see we've left an opportunity for a public park and a green connection between the cemetery and potentially a new park that would exist within the flood zone. So interesting opportunities. We looked then at sort of a hybrid, which would have a bit more housing and a smaller resort, to sort of show how a different mix might look. Again, we still have the park, we'd still have the green connection. It's just like an adjusted mix of housing and inn. Then we looked at just what would a residential option look like. This is sort of a mix of single-family homes, townhouses, apartments, and so on, similar to what exists in Yountville now. In fact, we just cut and pasted again some blocks of Yountville neighborhoods to show about how much more development this site could fit, especially if you left that northern portion where there's a flood zone, if you just left that open, let that be agriculture. And then finally, we wanted to show, because this is something that probably most people would be surprised to learn, the property, because it's zoned for agriculture, you could actually build a wine production facility and tasting room there. And so here we're showing Domaine Chandon and what that would look like on the property, to remind ourselves that if we do nothing, if we do nothing in terms of planning, it doesn't necessarily mean that nothing will happen in terms of development. So this is an opportunity to think about how we want to shape something that might happen a ways down the road. But this is our best opportunity right now for some time to come. So I think I'm going to hand it over to Nathan to describe what these exercises are.
Thanks. We're done talking to you. We want you all to talk now. So here, just to recap, raise your hand if you were chosen to be the scribe note taker of your table. Okay, you know who you are. Get a Sharpie, and you're going to be taking this legal size thing and one by one work through each of these questions. What was just shown to you right now were 3 different areas of town. That V Marketplace commercial area, that South Ag parcel where the Catholic Church is right now, and the North Ag parcel where it's all agriculture right now. In this packet that each of you will have, there's 2 pages dedicated to each of those 3 areas. There's a page on current conditions and a page on what if. What we want to hear your all thoughts on is what if, okay? So one by one, work with your table to talk about each of these 6 questions. Answer what if, what are your thoughts? If you have something completely new, write that down. There's going to be staff members roaming around. Some might be hovering right next to your table. Raise your hand if you have a question. We're here to help, okay? We're going to do this for a half hour, so that's about 5 minutes per question. And I'm going to say ding every 5 minutes to give you a hint to move on to the next question.
All of this is also available online. So again, high-level discussion today. If you want to have additional comments later, you can send them to us online. You can write them on the big board. So go. So finish your last thoughts, please. Note takers, please mark that down. Okay, we're going to start right here, and we're going to briefly go quickly, all the way through, very quickly. We're talking a minute. What's the one thing that your group walked away with tonight based on your comments? Who's your speaker?
So I'm going to try and summarize what, we have a lot of detailed notes, but the gist of what it was really about preserving what made Yountville unique. So it's not growth for growth's sake. So if it's about filling spaces, it's about identifying ways to fill it that make Yountville stay Yountville. I mean, you have St. Helena, it's much denser, they have a main street. Napa is obviously a bigger metro center, so let's not just fill the space with bigger, better, and more just because it's space to be filled. Let's think about what makes Yountville work. It's lower, we have vistas from more places than just the street. We have a very unique situation where we have agricultural land in the boundaries of the city. As you approach it, it says, welcome to Yountville, and you see vineyards. So we really think that keeping the agricultural spaces open and part of the town builds the character, and developing the town in a way that maintains what we feel and love as we walk down the street.
Well done. Back table. It's a speed round.
It's a speed round. Okay. So we were trying to decide between Walmart and Costco. I think that was, and a drive-through McDonald's was high on our list. No. What we really want is basically to preserve the view corridors and try to figure out interesting ways to attract new families, young families with children, hopefully to keep the school going, keep the community going as a community. So any way that we could get there, that's sort of what we were talking about. And just in terms of thinking outside the box, we thought about maybe a pension or a hostel.
Oh, pension or
teaming
hostel
up
is
with
great, okay.
the local UCs to do an artist in residence program, business incubators, some way to get people not just here, but here and involved in the community.
Great. Let's go to the middle table right here. Well done. Well done.
Some of these ideas would be overdone. It's like the first question is allowing buildings to be placed closer to the sidewalk was presented as infilling every existing space rather than perhaps adjusting existing buildings.
One measured.
There was some suspicion that allowing a little bit of a third story somewhere would result in a 3-story, 2-acre parking lot, which is a big deal. So it's kind of things that would change the character. There was suspicion of those. Things that would make things all stay unaffordable or make them less affordable. There was suspicion of that.
Okay.
What am I missing, friends? Looking at doing new things in existing structures rather than putting in new structures.
Okay.
Some infill, okay, the residential scale, and then the strength that there's so much economic pressure to overdevelop visitor things that a general plan strong enough to resist that is very difficult to pull off. Yountville has not been too successful so far. Second homes without people, not enough kids to fill the school is a result of the development.
Great. Well done. Well done. Well done. Let's go right over here, this back table here.
I think our basic premise is to approach everything with caution, moderation. Parking garages are lovely, but I don't want them, we don't want them in the middle of town.
Okay.
Moving the structures closer to the street, again in moderation, but I don't want to be Napa, where they're up against the street. Right now, we have trouble walking up and down the paths when there are 4 people, 2 coming in one direction and 2 in the other. I don't necessarily want to make the sidewalks 9 feet wide, but if we're going to do anything, if we could keep it like up at North Block, where it's nice and wide, but still plenty of room for people to move and doesn't seem to impinge on the street and the view. View corridor.
View corridor, hearing it again. Okay.
Big time.
Okay, good job. Let's go right over here to this table. So we got 4 down, 4 to go. Here we go.
Okay, here we go. We want more incubator, like into office use, and no tasting rooms. We would support a parking if it aesthetically fit with vines and bricks, with usable rooftop off of the path and road. We don't want it near the road. Appropriate density. No winery at the far end. Keep it the same, kind of like a mixed juice. We want that parcel split up, and we don't want to. We do not want another winery.
Okay, well done, well done, well done, well done. I will take that. Up here, who's our speaker here? Okay, there you go.
All right, I'm going to generalize. I think it was easier for this group to contemplate more of the city core elements and stuff, and looking at some of the creative ideas that were presented here. I think as it reached out towards more of the peripheral, the two parcels that were in discussion, that's closer to residents that we are accustomed to, and it's also mentioned that a lot of these walking paths, view corridors are very, very sensitive to us, and so it's more difficult to contemplate those developments on the peripheral part of the town. And I think in general, reuse or reconsidering some of the valuable housing stock and buildings that we have, and looking at those in a new creative way, we're easier to contemplate. So.
Great. Okay, well done, well done, well done. Two more. Who's our speaker here? Okay.
Basically, we want to keep the character of the town the way it is now. We don't feel we need a parking structure in town. We don't feel there needs to be 3-story structures in town. In terms of the two, the north and the south areas that are now agricultural, we would be open to affordable housing to the south. I think half of us would like to see the north parcel kept agricultural. Okay. We want to keep the green spaces the way they are. And I think there is also a feeling, if either north or south got developed, that there's not a need for more parks in this town. So, have I missed anything?
Thoughtful use of green space.
Yeah, thoughtful use of green space around, say, an affordable development would be something we would want to see.
Okay, great.
Great, thanks.
Thank you so much. Yay. All right, and we're finishing where we started.
All right, thank you. Let's see, we agreed to bring the buildings closer to the sidewalk, but again, keeping in moderation for sure. Let's see, we had a split decision on that though, did we not? Okay, let's see, we support parking. We supported a parking garage, but hopefully most of it underground.
Okay.
Okay. The south housing parcel to the south, employee housing, also multi-generational. I thought that sounded pretty cool, and we all agreed on that.
Multi-generational.
Correct? Okay. Mixed use. Billy came up with something. It's up in Davis, and it sounded really cool. It's called the Farm, where I guess it's a residential, and you have gardens that I guess you can work with and such. We talked about an upscale. Is Eric still here? Okay. Anyway, upscale grocery store at the north end. And let me see, what else did we talk? Myself, I'd like to see cannabis, but anyway, cannabis farm. And I think that's it.
Okay. So, all right, so we're ending on a high note with pot. Okay. So here's one for you guys all tonight. How did you like the meeting? Polling is now open. Did you love it, like it was just okay, didn't like it or hated it? Ignore that, but it'll show up again once everybody's gone in there. Okay, so everybody click in on that. Did you like it, love it, it's just okay, didn't like it, you hated it? Somebody hated it the last meeting, and he came up to me after the meeting and he said, because there were no cookies. And I want to point out that Nathan got cookies, so if my cookie-hating person is here tonight, you better like this meeting, because Nathan went out of his way to make sure you had cookies. Okay, let's see. All right. We have a love it, we have a like it, hated it. We have one more hated it again. Okay.
Cookies.
Kind of want to let you know with questions, next steps, yes. Okay, so our numbers just went up. Steve, we're doing better. Want to remind you all, envisionyountville.com. This presentation, background materials, all the things you've seen tonight are online. You can come back to that and share more information, share your comments. Thank you for coming. Leave your comment cards on the tables and do not take my clickers. Good night.